Broadcasting from the basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Fall Jersey. Joe Archino back here, and I really cannot believe still how quickly the college football season has come and gone so far this season. And I think every time the season goes, everyone is always kind of lining up who's going to be on the hot seat. We knew that there were some big names who were going to be on the hot seat this season, and one of them, their seat exploded, and that is, of course, Les Miles, who has been removed as the head coach of LSU. And look, it's a difficult situation because Les Miles unquestionably has been one of the very best college football coaches of the last 10 years with the success that he's had. The major amount of NFL talent he has produced is second to none. The reason, though, that Les Miles is no longer the coach of LSU, and I brought this up all the time, is you look at all the talent that he has. I think when you look at offensively, from the running back position to the wide receiver position to everywhere on defense, Les Miles has consistently had some of the best teams in the country with the best talent. The one area he has not had the talent, and it's the reason he got fired, is at quarterback. You go back to when LSU had their 13-1 season, basically, where they lost in the BCS championship game to Alabama. They lost that game behind the quarterback play. They had a tremendous defense that season. They had such talented playmakers everywhere. What they didn't have and what he has not been able to find is a quarterback. And it's amazing to think that a guy as talented as he is at bringing in all this top talent can't find a quarterback at that position. That's no longer something he's going to have to worry about because he's not there anymore, but it just really does show you, and it's amazing. I mean, we look at Alabama, Nick Saban. Basically, the last 5 times Les Miles has faced off against Nick Saban, Les Miles ended up on the losing end of that battle. It went 2011-12 in the championship game, in the regular season in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and then this year he didn't even get a chance to face against Nick Saban. But Nick Saban's not winning these games behind the strongest quarterback play. I think it's changing, certainly. Jay Coker needed to be a strong quarterback in the championship game last season against Clemson. We've seen moments where he's needed to have that, but largely Nick Saban's resume is not defined by strong quarterback play. And I think even a decent quarterback would have been able to be enough for Les Miles with the talent that he's had, but I still remember the name Anthony Jennings, Jordan Jefferson. This season, I mean, we look at Brandon Harris last year. We look at him starting the first game. They lose to Wisconsin. Danny Etling had to be the saving grace. And against Auburn this weekend, he couldn't be that saving grace. Auburn wins 18-13, but it just really does come to show you just the interesting dynamic of the SEC and of college football in general. You can have a stud roster. LSU, I'd put their roster up against last season's defense for LSU might have been one of the best defenses I've seen in the SEC in 5 to 6 years. But did LSU, I mean, you look at the way they finished last year, 9-3, losing to all the juggernaut programs, and I think that's another big reason why Les Miles obviously is no longer going to be the coach there, is you go up and down the resume basically the last 4 or 5 years, and all the losses have come against the other top teams in the SEC. In 2012, I already said basically the last 5 times Les Miles has faced against Nick Saban, he ended up on the losing front. But Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, Clemson, all these good teams who've really been at the forefront of the rankings, LSU hasn't been able to get it done against. And the biggest part of it to me is certainly the quarterback play, just Les Miles' inability to find one. But more than anything, it's just not being able to get those W's. I think that's another thing. And I did read an interesting thing, and a lot of people did make the point, well, why would you fire Les Miles now? Why not just let him finish out the season? And one of the interesting things I saw, and I don't remember the reporter who tweeted it, but he said the program was kind of afraid that he would kind of bring something back. He would salvage it a little bit. He would have a strong finish, and then they would just be in a continual cycle of repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And I could understand that. I mean, I don't think that the timing of this was the best. I certainly still would take Les Miles to coach my football team any day of the week. But if you're going to make the change and that's your reasoning for it, I understand. And look, Ed Ogeron is a guy where in USC he was faced with similar circumstances, and the players there loved him. I mean, before we saw Ed Ogeron not get the job, the head coaching job there, Steve Sarkisian, of course, succeeded him. The players on that team wanted Ed Ogeron to be the next head coach of USC. He didn't get the job, but I think this is another situation where, look, LSU is out of the running when it comes to anything relevant. They've got some great personnel on the outside. Leonard Fournette. On the defense, they've got some great talent. But at quarterback, there's just nothing there. I mean, Danny Etling is a guy you throw in there, and he just has to manage the game the best he can. But you've got nothing at quarterback where you could salvage much. But I do think Ed Ogeron is a guy where he's a player's coach. People love him. He's a rah-rah kind of guy, and people will rally to his side. But obviously the story here, and it's a difficult one because, I mean, we look at a guy, and I think Mark Wright is a perfect example. Tremendous coach, had tremendous success at Georgia, but he's kind of the similar case where couldn't win the big ones, couldn't get past the Nick Sabans of the world, and we see what he's doing now in Miami. He's going to have a tremendous amount of success there as well. Les Miles, wherever he ends up, is going to do the same thing. He's going to build another program that is capable of doing almost anything. The one thing, though, that I hope that he learns the most and that he finds is getting that quarterback. And it's Les Miles is a smart guy. If it was that easy, I'm sure he would have had one. But sometimes it just takes programs a really long time. I mean, look how long Texas has been down. We think now that Shane Buechele is kind of a guy where they can depend on for some time now. But when Colt McCoy left for the NFL, there was a major void there. Some programs just do a better job than others at filling that void, while some others offensively can get by. I mean, I go back to Nick Saban because I think it's a great example, but Saban largely hasn't won behind strong quarterback play. You look at McElroy, you look at A.J. McCarron. I think those guys between them, they have 3 championships, but basically they didn't win it because they were the high-flinging gunslingers throwing the ball down the field. They won that game behind the patented Nick Saban model. Pound the ball with a stud running back. Tremendous defense is not going to give the other team any room for error. And then your quarterback just has to be a manager and just control the game, not turn the ball over. That's what McCarron was, and that's what McElroy were. And they had a lot of success because of that. Now, I think once Blake Sims came into the picture, Alabama's MO kind of changed a little bit. He still was a little bit conservative by nature, but he definitely had more of a heavy passing element to his game. Then we look at Jay Coker. Certainly wasn't my favorite quarterback by any means. He had a lot of rough moments, but when it did matter most, he became the quarterback Nick Saban's team needed him to be to win. And then this year, I think you look at Jalen Hurts, probably the most mobile quarterback we've seen with Saban at Alabama, has a tremendous arm to boot. So that is another example just of the changing nature of the SEC. You're never going to have to be able to bring the same thing to the table. And I think we've seen in the SEC that Les Miles is kind of a perfect example of the change in the shift we've seen in the SEC. You can't any longer rely on your okay, decent game-managing quarterback. You need a quarterback who can go out there and win football games. We look at Gus Malzahn. I mean, we anointed Gus Malzahn kind of the genius, the best offensive mind in college football. I still am a big Gus Malzahn fan, but he certainly hasn't shown that same ability than he did his first season with Nick Marshall. And Nick Marshall, even by himself, wasn't a great passer. The SEC is changing. You no longer can get by with a guy who's not a consistent passer and who doesn't have a deep ball threat. I mean, Chad Kelly is an interesting one because when we look at Chad Kelly, I think that's kind of hurts my argument there because he has all those things, but Ole Miss is kind of in a state right now where they've got looming NCAA penalties coming against them, and I think there's a lot of things kind of other that are hurting them there, but maybe not the best mobility there, but Jalen Hurts very well could be that example of what the SEC needs. You've got a consistent passer who's got the legs who can help him as well, but Les Miles, to me, I've been saying it year after year. The reason I think he's fired is that inability to find that quarterback. Talent-wise, stacks up with Nick Saban every day of the week. Look at the NFL talent he's been able to produce. All the NFL playmakers today, we watch them on Sundays. They got their start at LSU because of Les Miles, and it's really just shows you the importance of finding that guy, and he just hasn't been able to do it. But wherever he ends up, Les Miles could coach my program any day of the week. Until the next time, Jersey Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino, and I'll catch everybody in the next segment.